welcome to another exclusive interview by Recovery Today Magazine and Recovery Today Podcast, where first and foremost, we're a magazine of hope. This guest actually is kind of almost not really a guest because she is the longest continuous contributor to Recovery Today that we have had. She's literally been in every single issue that we have published, and usually, if not always, she's been the very first feature. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's an expert on relationships and codependency. She's the author of 9 books. 3 of her books, Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You. The second book is Codependency for Dummies. And her latest book is Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist, Essential Tools for Improving or Leaving Narcissistic and Abusive Relationships. She's counseled hundreds or thousands of individuals and couples for 27 years, coaches internationally. She's sought after on radio and every other place. My guest today is Darlene Lancer.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for sharing my blogs every month.
Yeah, I've always loved the whole idea of codependency because this is not just a one-person kind of a thing. So I've always appreciated all of your content that you've contributed. So thank you for that.
Well, yeah, what you bring up is interesting because when I wrote Conquering Shame and Codependency for Hazelden, I had an argument with the editor-in-chief because I defined codependency as someone whose thinking and their behavior revolves around something external, be it a person, a process like gambling or sex addiction, or a substance like alcohol or food. And he disputed that. And so my feeling was that codependency underlies all addiction. It's a disorder of the self. It's your relationship with yourself that's dysfunctional. And then that spills over to your relationship with other people or substances. And he said, well, how could that be? Because you have the addict and then you have the codependent. They're in relationship to each other. They can't both be codependent. Anyway, so we got around that. We got past that. And after I wrote Conquering Shame and Codependency, well, actually, after I wrote Codependency for Dummies, my first book, I thought that a lot of people that would reach out to me would be those that were in relationships with addicts. That was my past experience. But to my surprise, all these people that were in relationships with narcissists were calling me. And those were the posts on my social media that got a lot of attention. And it seems that in some ways, for the person, the partner, it's not that dissimilar, and I can go into that. But
what exactly is a narcissist?
Okay, so first of all, there's the term narcissism, and there's such a thing as healthy narcissism. And in fact, codependents lack enough narcissism. They're not narcissistic enough in the healthy sense of the word, meaning that you have a strong ego, you're ambitious, you go after what you want, you have confidence in yourself, things like that. And there are a lot of examples of public figures that are leaders in their field. They have no trouble setting boundaries, but they also can be empathetic and caring.
President Trump, not to be political, full-on narcissist.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I would contend that you do need to have narcissism, though, to be any kind of an effective leader. You have to think that you can do it. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, Oprah is an example of healthy narcissism. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a developmental stage, and for someone with a personality disorder, they don't accomplish that developmental stage in a healthy way for a number of reasons, which I won't go into now. So, and then there's narcissistic. Someone can act narcissistically and have some narcissistic traits, but they may not be full-blown NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. And that's defined, and I'll go into the definition. So there's 3 core traits that you have to have. The first being lack of empathy. And then next is a sense of grandiosity, that you're the greatest and the best. And it could be in your fantasy world. You may not be successful in your life. And third, that you have an unrealistic need for, excessive need for admiration. Okay. And then you need just 2 more. You only need 5 traits. So of the 2 more, it could be that you're envious of other people and you think that they're envying you, that you're arrogant, that you like to associate with high status people or high status institutions, drive the best car, or I went to the best school and only a 5-star restaurant, hang out with celebrities and public figures or successful people. And then there's another trait is entitlement. And that's very obnoxious to people that are close to a narcissist. They don't think rules apply to them, only for other people. Some have no problem breaking the law, and that they're special and that they are entitled to special treatment. So for instance, with one couple that I talked to, he expected his wife to be very interested in all of his activities and his work. And she said, well, are you interested in mine? You don't ask me about my work. And he said, no, I'm not interested. But he had no compunction of saying, but you should listen to me and be interested in me. Okay. Or you take care of me when I'm sick, but I don't have to take care of you. So people say, oh, I did all this for the narcissist, my partner, but they don't reciprocate. Well, they don't think that way. You have to understand that's not how they think. So that's entitlement. And then another really nasty trait is exploitation. Will they exploit you or other people for their own ends? So those are some of the.
So it's funny as we're reading this, of course, I don't know, as you're saying this, probably anybody that is watching this is thinking, I'm going down a checklist, right? And at first I was like, oh, wow, like I'm a narcissist, because I think this, but then there's other things like, yeah, I really enjoy to meet and talk with and interview famous people. And of course I tell my friends like, oh yeah, hey, and I do think also, I will say that I think a lot of the rules don't apply to me. I've always had a long kind of thing that I'm the guy that can get into the bank, or back in the day it was, I remember returning a videotape. My girlfriend, now my wife, was in the car and she's like, they're closed. I'm like, they just closed. Like, I'm the guy that can return the tape. I knock on the door, I say something. And that's, but I do think honestly, there's a healthy kind of a thing, like a little bit of like, I can find a way to get things done. The part which doesn't jive with me, which gives me a little bit of reprieve personally on this as I do my own self-assessment, is I really do have on one hand, I don't care if people don't like me. I think a little bit, I think there's a little bit of a healthyism in that, but I know that I do have a compassion for people pretty strongly.
So there you go. Yeah. So many codependents wonder if they're narcissistic because there's a lot of overlap in my book. My new book has a whole chapter comparing, because I believe that narcissists are codependent, but that doesn't make codependents narcissistic.
Interesting.
And I go into that and I compare all the core, they share some of the core features. So, but I have to add that narcissism exists on a continuum. So there may be someone who has only three of the traits and they're mild. And someone else has all nine of them, and they're severe. So the more traits you have, the more severe they are, the more serious is the disorder. And also, now aggression isn't on there. Notice, not all narcissists are aggressive, and not all violent either. But the more aggressive a person is, the worse the narcissism is.
So the person that is aggressive is far more prone to be narcissistic. However, a narcissistic person is not necessarily aggressive. Is that right?
I didn't say that a person that's aggressive might be narcissistic. That may or may not be true. A lot of addicts are aggressive. maybe just when they're drinking, or
Yeah.
maybe they have trauma in their childhood and they have a lot of rage.
Yeah.
So, or they could be sociopaths and
Right.
narcissists. So, and I go into the difference between that. So, like you said, if you go on social media and a lot of blogs, narcissists are labeled like evil, stay away from them. But the people that call me love their partner or their family member, and they want to stay in the relationship. And not all narcissists are that despicable. So only the ones like, they call them more malignant. There's 4 types of narcissists. And the one is the more cruel and malicious. Those are more malicious, and they have more of the traits, and they're more aggressive and difficult. So I want to help people to understand narcissism and how to improve the relationships, how to communicate better and get their needs met. And that's what I have in the book, which is also means overcoming your codependency, because you have to build your self-esteem. You have to learn to be assertive and set boundaries with a narcissist. And whether you stay or leave, it's like a book of self-transformation within the relationship.
It's interesting to me because I'm thinking between the relationship of the addict and the codependent. So maybe it is a child and it's a parent. Probably, I would say offhand, that's the best example I can come up with. And I'm thinking, like, isn't it more likely, you had said that the codependent can be the narcissist, but it seems to me like it's much more likely that you've got the addict as the narcissist, and then you've got somebody feeding the narcissism, or no?
I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Underneath the narcissism,
Yeah.
is codependency.
Ah.
And you have to don't think of codependence as always passive. There's a type of codependence where they're very passive and unassertive. There's other codependents that are bullies, they could be, but they're codependents too. They could be aggressive, but that's the way they cope. That's the way their communication style is, to be argumentative, for instance, or controlling. So there's different types. The classic stereotypical codependent is very adapts. I call them the accommodator. In my book on shame, over here, this way,
Yeah.
I talk about 3 ways that children learn to cope with the trauma of emotional abandonment and shame in their childhood. And the first is to move against people. And I call those are the masters. They want to have power in order to feel safe. And that would be, a narcissist would fall into that category. Not all people that want power are narcissists, but they would want to be masters. That's how they feel safe, is to have power in a relationship. And then there's children that think, if I please mommy and daddy, I'll be loved and be safe, and they accommodate. And then there's the child who withdraws and just I'm going to be an island to myself. And I call them like the bystander. They don't want to get involved. A healthy person has a combination of all 3 traits, and they can bring one personality to the forefront when necessary. But someone with codependency, a narcissist, they're kind of stuck in their role, and they don't know. They feel, many codependents feel compelled to please, for instance, compelled to take care of someone else. They feel guilty about someone else's if they don't help someone.
This is learned behavior, right? This is learned. This is not genetic. This has got to be learned, right?
Codependency is passed down. It's learned, it's modeled, and it's also adaptive to a dysfunctional, insecure environment. Now, for narcissism, there's evidence that about 50% is inherited. So they don't know exactly. They do research with twins. And the statistics show that about 50% of the cases, even, I guess, narcissists that are raised in a healthy environment, well, if they have a narcissistic parent, they'll turn out to be narcissistic. So they separate. So they're brought up in different environments. Or they don't
Oh,
separate them,
interesting.
but they do studies with children that are
Separated
raised
twins.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So how, you kind of already alluded, but I want to tie it in a little stronger. How did this focus and this expertise that you have developed and this passion toward this occur kind of in relation, I guess, to addiction, recovery,
Sure.
substance abuse? How did this come about?
Great question. Okay. So I was married to an abusive alcoholic. I went to Al-Anon. I got therapy. I recovered. Okay. And part of that process was I changed careers because I was doing a career. I was a lawyer. I was an entertainment lawyer.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't really my calling. Part of that was to get, recognition from a narcissistic mother, and which I never got, so trying to please somebody is not going to satisfy your needs. So I made that career change, and then I started, well, I had actually been writing also as a lawyer. And then when I changed careers, I got back to my original desire, which was to be a therapist. As a child, I wanted to be a psychologist growing up. And so I made that midlife, I made that career change, and I was then writing, and then there was the internet, and I was blogging about different subjects, and I had my own private practice. And Wiley Publishing found one of my blogs called Are You Codependent? And they decided they wanted a book on codependency. So I competed with some other therapists and authors, and they chose me to write it. And at that time, on reflection, I realized that's what I had been helping people with my whole career. It had been my own journey. I just never named it that this was a specialty, but I was helping people become more assertive. I was helping them individuate and be more themselves, be more authentic. So I had been doing that all along. And so I wrote that book. And as I said, then after it came out, Hazelden read it, and they said, we'd like you to write a book on shame and codependency, because Breen Brown's book had been successful. So I did that and focused on codependency and addiction. I think the title, they found a blog I wrote, was like, shame is the core of addiction. So they wanted that to apply to codependency and addiction. And my feeling was that shame underlied all codependency. And that if you look at my book on conquering shame, I go into how all of the symptoms of codependency stem from shame. If you look at, they're all a defense.
What are they ashamed of? What is the where I know
their true self, who they are. So I say on my website, people go to therapy because they want to change themselves. They don't realize all they have to do is accept themselves. So in childhood, in my research, what the researchers see is that every child needs to feel loved as an individual for who they are by both parents. And it's not enough to say, I love you. That the child needs to feel that you're interested in them, that you want a relationship with them. And not just because you're an A student, or you're a good athlete, or you're pretty, but for who you are. So that's the difference between love that's real and love that's conditional. And that helps a child to feel safe to be themselves. And there's also things that go back into infancy, which I'm not going to get into now, but I have some blogs on my website about early parenting, even before a child can walk, that where a mother has to attune to the baby's needs rather than the reverse.
Okay, so I'd like to ask, so a few questions that I have, first of all, is I love the whole idea of self-improvement. And I love the idea of life is dynamic. If you don't like the way that things are, you can improve them. And I love the idea of personal responsibility. Things suck or whatever, then fix it. And the whole idea of accepting responsibility, or just not dwelling on this happened in my past, but what are we going to do now to be solution oriented? And as you know, I'm not a therapist, so these are just common sense kind of things that I have. But how do you balance out? And I think understand at least, but I can't articulate a healthy acceptance of, I like myself and I'm okay. It sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit or something like that, against like, I'm healthily unsatisfied with where I am, with how I look, with what I know. How do you balance that out between the idea that I'm good the way that I am, or my kid is good the way that I am, or my spouse is good the way that I am, whether they are, with the whole idea that you can grow. And if you're not growing, you're dying. And some of these little mantras that we have, how do we balance that kind of a thing out?
Well, I think it's all in the tone, because you can discern something without being judgmental. So I always say to people, this is one of my first exercises, is I have a book on 10 steps of self-esteem, the ultimate guide to stop self-criticism, and to write down every day your negative self-talk. And that includes shoulds. So are you
Could have
just
done that,
observing?
should have done that, could have done that, would have done that.
And the other thing is, like, some of the flaw, what you may consider a flaw, is just part of being human.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we're lazy, sometimes we're selfish, sometimes we're greedy, sometimes we're envious. These are just part of humanity, rather than think, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that, I shouldn't have done that, and feeling shame about it. So what I was going to get to is, shame underlies codependency. It also underlies narcissism. And just as I said that the traits of codependency are a way of coping, like a defense to codependency. In other words, taking care of someone else. Then I could feel okay about myself. They're going to be dependent on me. They're not going to leave me. And I don't have to reveal who I am. So that's just one example. And, or not being assertive. So you're hiding who you are because you're ashamed of what you're going to say, or you're afraid someone's going to leave you if you set a boundary or something like that. So all these are defenses. So similarly with the narcissist, all of that obnoxious behavior and seeking power all the time is because they feel weak and insecure and ashamed of who they are inside. Some may be conscious, and others it may be unconscious, or like just, moments when they have feelings of humiliation, but then they block it out. So having to be better, having to be the first, feeling arrogant, wanting the best, needing a lot of attention and validation, envying others. These are all ways to feel better about themselves, like a bully who is insecure inside. So shame. So now I have expertise in codependency and shame and narcissism, and they're all integrated. They all overlap, because the narcissist and the codependent are like mirrors of each other. The narcissist will look down on other people, and the codependent will idealize other people. That's partly how they get attracted.
Wow. That is very interesting, that the codependent looks up, the narcissist looks down. Mm-hmm. Let's transition a little bit so that we got some good time to talk about your latest book, Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist, and then the tools about either fixing that situation or leaving that situation, and especially in an abusive situation. So I guess let's start a little bit at the dating. It's funny, I hear women a lot of times, usually it's women, they'll say like, there's just nobody out there. And now we're going to put another checkbox on there, and that, are they a narcissist or not?
Well, I have a whole chapter on that. You have to be aware of your own vulnerable points. First of all, if you have low self-esteem, if you're depressed, if you're codependent, if you have trouble setting boundaries and things like that, you're going to be more susceptible to that. Because if you feel down about the degree that you feel down about yourself or depressed might correspond to the degree which you might idealize someone else. You think this person's wonderful, they're going to like rescue me from my sad, lonely life. So if you have a full life and you're happy, you're less likely to do that, to find like, oh, this is the hero, I finally found my savior. And that's kind of what some people think, and they don't realize there's a desperate need inside. And where that comes from is not having that secure, loving relationship with a mother or father to begin with. So if you have a narcissist in your family, it'll feel familiar. So some of the signs then might be seduction, love bombing. They're making a lot of promises right at the beginning before you even know each other, trying to wow you with gifts and expensive dates, things like that. And pay attention to how you feel inside. If you feel uncomfortable speaking up, asking for what you want, setting boundaries, saying no, those aren't butterflies. People get confused between excitement and anxiety. You might want to think, is it anxiety? Do I feel safe? Do I feel relaxed with this person? The thing is, a lot of people will go out with someone who's healthy and would be a secure partner, and they say, oh, well, he was boring or she was boring. And they're looking for that excitement. Dating a narcissist can be thrilling. They're very interesting. They're unpredictable.
Are they almost always attractive?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but those are the ones that we see, in the public.
That's the first thing that pops into your mind is mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all. I find it interesting to think of, but my first thing is like, I'm so great. And then it's like, yeah, I'm thinking like, you're not really even very good looking. Like, how are you a narcissist? Is it almost always, because it's not almost always an overlap, or how does somebody, I don't understand, because we give nonverbal cues back to people that are more attractive by the standards that we have. It seems like there would almost
there's in the general population, narcissism is about under 5%.
Oh,
they don't know exactly. Like it used to say like 2%, but some people dispute those statistics.
We throw this term out though all the time. That person's a narcissist.
I know it. Okay, but in the entertainment business, it's like 17%.
What
so
is
those
it?
are the people.
17?
17.
Oh, 17. Okay.
So that's who you're seeing in the public, and they're drawn to the public eye. So they want to be in politics. They want to be, celebrities. So that's why you associate that too. But there's a lot that are, ordinary looking, but they think they're terrific.
They think they're all that.
Yeah. So, so those are.
Now, can you tell it from their Instagrams? Can before you date them, and how do they make me feel? Can we determine before we swipe left or swipe right whether this is likely to be a narcissist or not? Because when you're dating or whatever, not that I have any experience, I'm coming up on 24 years of marriage, so I've never had a. Thank you. I often say it's 14 of the happiest of my life, because it's very, very tough a lot of times. But so I've never really had any experience with swipe left, swipe right, but I understand what it is. So is there a way to determine this a little bit visually, or like what they say from a profile?
Yeah. All right. So someone who's self-centered or vain, that's not enough to be a narcissist. Someone who's selfish.
But we don't want to be with people that are selfish.
I know. Well, that may be another reason, but it's not one of the, I didn't mention selfishness as one of the criteria.
Interesting.
So, that's it. A lot of codependents say, oh, my partner's so selfish. They don't realize they're too selfless. They're not picking up enough for what they want. So they think, he or she always gets their way, but they go along with it. That's one of the things you see. Codependents give their power away. And the whole point of my book And what I experienced in my own marriage is you have to change the power dynamic and claim your own power. And then you're going to see the narcissist, like the witch in the Wizard of Oz, the witch of the East, is just going to like disintegrate.
Yeah.
Because when they're not on top, they become very scared, dependent, like a child. So you have to, and my book goes into how to do this and scripts to do this.
Well, give us a nugget or two. Give us a couple nuggets. How do they do it? A little bit.
Well, let me just back up for a second, because you talked about seeing somebody's picture and dating them.
Yes.
So they did research, and they had people interview different people, and they, for like 20 minutes or something. And everybody liked the person that was a narcissist until the 7th meeting. And then they start to see other aspects of the personality that they didn't like, because one way a narcissist gains power is to make you like him or her. They want to seduce you. They might even marry you. Oh, I like that food too. Oh, I was there. Oh, that's my favorite song. So they might even do that to seduce you into thinking you're the same.
Dream come true.
Exactly. It's only later, that's a lot of work for them. So after they think they've caught you, they stop trying so hard. And then you start to see what they're really like. So it takes time.
I just call that false advertising.
Well, a lot of people do that, not just narcissists. That's why I say go slow, pay attention to how you feel inside, speak up, don't hide your feelings, see how the person deals with them. And then in the relationship, the first step is get information. So I spent a lot of time in the book explaining what motivates them and why they are the way they are and their defenses and what to look for, and to truly understand where they're coming from, because people don't understand that their brain works differently than a narcissist's brain. They measure the narcissist against themselves. They say, well, I did all this for you. I helped you with your work. I took care of you when you're sick. And now I just ask you for a favor and you won't do it. And then they're angry and disappointed. Well, their expectations are misguided because they're not understanding. A narcissist thinks a relationship is like a business transaction. So they want to get the most for the lowest cost. So you have to raise the cost for them to get what they want. You have to communicate and think like they think in order to reclaim your power. So that's, you have to understand what they're thinking. And then the next thing is the same thing with an addict. You have to learn to detach. You're not going to change them, but if you change your behavior, they will change in response to you. So detaching, which they teach in Al-Anon, which I learned as a good student. First step, you're powerless over other people, places, and things. And where does your power lie? Well, build your autonomy. Don't make the narcissist or your partner, whoever that narcissist is, it could be a friend, the center of your life. Don't obsess about it. And people do a lot of things that give more things that give their power away. For instance, they argue, they explain, they defend themselves. All of that is a waste of time. And anyone, not just a narcissist, any abuser is not interested in the facts. They're interested in winning the argument and putting you on the defensive, or making you feel small, or demean you, or switching the blame to you. And the more you talk, the weaker you get. So you don't engage in those conversations.
So it's okay to just go, yeah, I don't want to do that. And then you don't have to say, well, here's why I don't want to do it. And it's really important that you understand, like, why. You could just go, yeah, I don't want to do that. Or
they say, well, your thinking is all wrong. Something, just say, well, that's my opinion, and you walk away. Or we just disagree. We disagree. I have a lot of scripts in the book, and like and 9 steps on how to communicate. So and then the next thing, so you have to get information. You have to Q-tip. I learned in Al-Anon. You quit taking it personally. Whatever they say, and a projection is their favorite defense. Mostly what they say is about themselves. So they might say, oh, you're so selfish, but they're the ones that are selfish. So I even had couples where the husband was obsessed with his weight And so he would nag his wife to go to the gym and lose weight, and her weight was perfectly fine, but that was his issue.
Yeah.
So, so to quit taking it personally, don't react. And then you have to learn how to set boundaries. And that you have to do it in a very skillful way, because narcissists have so much shame and insecurity, they are very thin-skinned. So people always say they can dish it out, but they can't take it. So you have to phrase things in a certain way to get your needs met. Now, some narcissists aren't even interested in your feelings. Some would be, and some won't be. So telling them how you feel might not be helpful, but telling them how their behavior is impacting the relationship might get their attention if they're not going to get their needs met.
Right.
You have to be very skillful about it and persistent, and it's going to take support, because it's very hard, because they will keep pushing the boundaries. And when you make changes, they don't want the status quo to change. They want to be on top. So when you start emphasizing, look, for this relationship to work, it has to be a two-way street, they don't want to hear that. So you're going to have to keep reiterating it, and you'll need support, to keep your mind above water, so you're not always, being brought down by the narcissist. And so getting support, and then develop activities, as I said, become more autonomous, do things to build your own self-esteem.
Yeah.
Learn to nurture yourself. I have a self-love meditation on my website. Don't look to the narcissist to nurture you. Actually, in any relationship, that's your responsibility to nurture yourself, to meet your own needs. Your happiness and your unhappiness is your responsibility.
I'm fascinated by all of this conversation about narcissism and codependent, because ultimately it's not just for the person that's in recovery, it's for everybody around.
Well, there is statistics about 22.5% of people with personality disorder abuse substances. So there is that overlap. And sometimes addicts, when they're in the throes of their addiction, can act in ways like a narcissist. They have mood swings. They can be, they won't take responsibility for their behavior. They can be verbally or physically even abusive. And they can't regulate their emotions. So there's a lot of similarities there. But when they're sober, you're going to see a different personality, and unless they have those core traits of narcissism. So yeah, I think in a relationship with an addict, usually they want all the attention. They want to be number one. Same thing. So it's like, how do you take back your power, and how do you refocus on yourself? Because from a codependence point of view, we lose ourselves in a relationship, just giving up ourselves to somebody else. And with a narcissist or someone with a personality disorder, often it's like their way or the highway.
Yeah.
So it takes courage to set boundaries and say no. And it is developing that relationship with yourself, because even if people leave an abuser and then they find 6 months later, I'm living with the abuser and it's me.
Right.
I'm abusing myself. And the way we treat ourselves, the way our self-esteem and how we value ourselves is reflected in our relationships.
Right.
If you really love yourself, you won't let someone abuse you. And I've had many people come to me and say, I've had several relationships with someone who's a narcissist or an abuser or an addict, and they don't know why. They keep getting into these relationships because they haven't fixed the relationship themselves. That is the template, because ultimately you live with yourself, no matter who your partner is. That's who you spend your life with. And, hopefully, if you follow the steps in my book, you'll improve that relationship with yourself. And you might decide to leave because your relationship with the narcissist is not adding to your life, and you're so happy in the rest of your life. Not because you're so unhappy, but I always tell people, have a life to go towards, not just something to get away from. Build your life independent. And then it makes more balance. You might decide to stay for many reasons, or you might decide to leave.
As anybody can see, this is the whole reason. I just love your thinking, your brain, your wisdom, experience. This is why we've, long ago, pretty much any, this is why we feature every single month. Your stuff is in Recovery Today, every single month.
Well, thank you. Well, the next one for May is going to be about the false self.
The false self. Okay.
False self, and codependents and narcissists to an extreme function from their false self before recovery. And recovery is all about reclaiming your true self, like in the title of my book on shame. Most codependents don't even know where that is, who that is, how to find it, and then it's scary to be authentic. And that's, the opposite of shame is authenticity. And that's really the goal of codependence, of recovery. One more thing I'll add to that is, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you're unhappy in your work or in your relationship, there's a good chance that it's out of alignment with your soul. And my new website, my name, darlenelancer.com, it's all about being in alignment with your soul. And that's where you found your peace and your power, is being in alignment with who you really are. Not trying to please somebody else, not trying to be the best, but being really connected to who you are and on your soul path. So if a relationship ends, it's because you're out of alignment. So,
It's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
What is the name again of your latest book? People can get it at Amazon, I suppose, or on your website.
Yeah. Dating, Loving, and Leaving a Narcissist: Essential Tools for Improving or Leaving Abusive or Narcissistic Relationships. So it's not just with a narcissist. It could be a partner with a borderline personality disorder, or an addict, or anyone who's abusive and highly defensive. In fact, that's the other thing. People are saying, do you think so-and-so is a narcissist? Do you think my husband or my wife is a narcissist? I say, forget the labels.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. How are you feeling in the relationship? Are you getting your needs met? How is the communication? How is the intimacy? Try to work on that. Forget the label. It really doesn't matter.
Yeah, good stuff. And people can find you at your website.
Whatiscodependency.com. And I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Pinterest and YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. I have a media page with a lot of podcasts and interviews, and over 200 blogs. You could subscribe to my monthly blog. I also blog on Medium and in Recovery Today.
Terrific.
So,
well, we're thrilled. We're thrilled to have you part of Recovery Today, every single issue.
Thank you.
We're going to have all of the links in here in this feature. And thank you so much for everything you do. Like I said, I'm just, I'm thrilled every single month to include
My pleasure.
just some nuggets. So, well, this is a long overdue interview with our friend, Darlene Lancer. You can get back to her, get all of her books and all of her nuggets. And I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much.